Building Wise Families podcast. I'm Alan.
And I'm Corrie.
This is episode number 2. Today, we are interviewing Katie Wetsell to find out what to do when my child's anxiety makes me anxious. Katie is a pediatric nurse and mom of 4 through birth and adoption. She's passionate about encouraging and empowering parents to love their families with confidence and connection. She's been trained in space treatment to help parents support their children in overcoming anxiety. Katie founded Parent with Hope to offer personalized parent coaching, and she also partners with Young Lives to provide parenting support to teen moms.
And as a little side note, we met Katie when we were both part of the certification program through Connected Families to become parent coaches. So now we're fellow coaches and friends. We're so excited to have you on the podcast, Katie. Thanks for coming.
Feelings mutual. I'm glad to be here.
So, Katie, we wanted to get started on this conversation about anxiety just by asking you, what even motivated you to want to help parents whose children are dealing with anxiety? What's your story about that?
So thinking back on how I got here, I just want to give a note to the beginning, which was probably nursing school. And so part of nursing school is you have to do a rotation through psychiatric nursing. And I learned a lot, but it was affirming that this was not my field. And so I went into pediatric health and also became a pediatric nurse practitioner. And I found that, part of why nurses have to go through that psych rotation is so you could care for a psych patient, right? Psychiatric illness, mental illness can show up anywhere in the healthcare system. Someone could be there for a broken leg, but they also have a psychiatric diagnosis. But all the kids I cared for had anxiety to some degree or at some point in their experience. And so I really had a lot of motivation and accountability to build skill in how to work through that anxiety with a child so that I could perform what I needed for their care in the least traumatic way possible for all of us. So then also empowering parents in that. I always say, I went into pediatric care because I knew I loved kids. And then I found out how much I loved parents. And so part of that skill was how to encounter the parents' anxiety and provide that calm and direction they needed to support their child through an anxious experience. And so that was probably my first encounter was, parallel to nursing care.
Okay. So you were exposed to anxiety and learned more about it through your nursing experience. But how did it show up in your own family? My oldest was very intense and sensory, needed a lot of help calming just from a sensory perspective. And as he got older, I did notice this kind of anxiety component. I think at the time I just kind of identified it as neurotic, as this kind of just sensitivity and intensity. And he just is a fast-paced kid, learns really quick. He's super smart, one of these sponges. But, I was struggling with how to help him with the intensity of his emotions. And one book I read at the time was called Why Smart Kids Worry. And so that was kind of my introduction to understanding what was going on with my son through the lens of anxiety. And it really kind of helped pinpoint where his anxiety was showing up. And so that was kind of helpful to begin to understand kind of how to be patient with him and build skill and work with him through that. And then probably puberty is when we noticed, like, whoa, this is on another level. Like, I know all the neuroscience and have been, lots of continuing education on these kind of things. And so I knew what was coming, but it's a different thing to experience it for your unique kid, what all that neuroscience actually looks like in your house and in your relationship. So that's when I noticed really this generalized anxiety, that he was just having these feelings like something bad was going to happen. And it wasn't based on any situation that had occurred or that he remembered. And it wasn't really even specific. It was just this feeling of dread. And so I used this communication skill, active listening, called motivational interviewing, and just kind of walked him through. And it really is in line with the things I learned through the Connected Families of, really kind of listening and asking good questions. But it gave me some structure. I love structure to help me through these sticky situations. And so, I found these different points. Information was great, but when there was structure provided for how to walk with my child through it was really orienting and helpful for me.
So, Katie, you were learning about his anxiety in a deeper way and tools to help. Did any of your other children struggle with similar issues?
My second child, he had been diagnosed with Tourette syndrome around 6. But he was also, the tics didn't really bother me, once especially I understood what was going on. I had seen much worse as a nurse. It's not life-threatening, we're good. But he was having really intense meltdowns. And with trying to understand his tics, there were some behaviors where he was doing the motor activity, so like tapping things or touching things. And, I asked him about it and asked if it was just touching it, or was it a certain number? And it was a certain number. And I talked to our neurologist about it, and she called it OCD-like behaviors. And so kind of like a soft term. And OCD is really common with Tourette's, but was it a tic? Was it a compulsion? I didn't really know until the pandemic. And when the pandemic came, I noticed my son's tics were lessened. He, it's a more relaxed schedule. And so that was kind of easier for him. And I just asked him about it. I was like, I've noticed you're not ticking as much, how do you feel about it? How's it going? just kind of threw it out there that I had noticed it looked like things were getting better. And he was like, yeah, but I'm still counting a lot. And I was like, counting? What do you mean? He's like, if I move from one surface to another surface, I need to touch a third surface. I was like, huh. We talked about, and he gave me a few more examples of him counting. And when his dad got home, I mentioned it to him. And so his dad asked, is this happening sometimes or all the time? He's like, all the time. Oh, okay. So I did my research because that's what I do. And I really tried to get my head around, was this a compulsion or a tic? And it really seemed to be more of a compulsion. And so I reached out to a neighbor who I knew son had OCD, and she pointed me to a local resource. And so we went and got evaluated by just, the therapist. And, as she's doing the evaluation, it comes out he is having some intrusive thoughts that he hadn't, told us about, and he could barely even tell the therapist about, but he did. And so through the evaluation, we learned more of what was going on, because the second child in particular is more withdrawn in his emotions, that he tends to turn inward. And so I learned a lot more about OCD because of my child. Just like my oldest son, I learned a lot more about anxiety because he needed me to. And so I learned a lot more about OCD. And I really wanted to know what I was going to do about it, because especially during the pandemic, he's home all the time. So how do I support him? Like, I love that we have the therapist to help us and to help him, but like, how can I help him as his mom? And so I inserted myself a lot in his teletherapy because I had questions and I wanted to know, was what I doing, was it supportive or not?
Yeah. So you were learning about anxiety not only in your nursing background, but then also in your own family with your own kids. So what happened to help you transition from nursing to parent coaching?
As I began, as you mentioned, transitioning out of nursing into parent coaching, I heard from one of my resources that I'd used about SPACE treatment. And so SPACE stands for Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions. And when I heard about it and kind of the approach and how they used empathy and confidence to hold the child responsible, I was like, that's the connected families framework. There it is again. So I looked into it and whether we could afford the training, and I decided to add that to my tool belt because again, looking back on my nursing experience, and there's a time I was a nursing professor, and a lot of nurses have anxiety. And so I definitely got some practice there, but I saw how God had used my nursing background to prepare me to come alongside families. And then also understanding that the dynamic when it's your family, from what I had been through with my sons with generalized anxiety and OCD.
Okay, so we've been talking about what I would typically view as anxiety. We threw in some OCD in there and discussed the differences. I think most parents would probably think anxiety was like worry, dread. Does this ever show up as control? Just thinking about if you see a child who's just trying to control everything around them, and maybe they're siblings, but they're not necessarily, trembling or hesitating from a situation. Do you approach that the same way? Is that anxiety too?
Yeah, so I would say, again, I can speak to personal experience. My older son, his anxiety comes out as definitely negativism. And I've explained that to him, that anxiety can show up in your thoughts and really how you see the world. And so that's been helpful for him to know that the negative things he sees, his anxiety makes them heavier, right? And makes them bigger. And so that helps him, again, kind of separate that the way this feels might not be the way it is. I might not be weighing things equally. It can show up as aggression for him. It's being really desperate and driven to control his environment to make him feel better. And I just have too many kids for that. So that's been why I haven't accommodated that. It's like, I can't make this car full of people quiet, right? So we're going to have to move through the framework and find another way. And I can't, me controlling him when he's being controlling is a recipe for disaster. And most parents could probably tell you that from experience too. But so neither works, me being controlling in response or trying to make the whole world revolve around him. Neither of those are effective. So definitely it shows up as aggression for him, stomach aches. And so even like positive things trigger his anxiety. So if he's excited about something, all of a sudden he's like really grumpy and really negative because that higher level of arousal turns negative, and then he'll get a stomach ache. And then I'm like, well, what did you eat? What did you do? And as he's gotten older, he's been able to say, I think I was just really anxious about this thing, and that's why my stomach was hurting. And so there can be physical symptoms that go along. And then, like I mentioned with my older son, his just temperament, he tends to withdraw in stress. And so with the anxiety, he's going to withdraw. And he wasn't looking to control anyone else. But that's why it was kind of harder, because he was withdrawn with his anxiety. And so it really took a lot of building that safety, not to calm him down, but to enter in. Right. So my older son, who's controlling, is trying to bring people in so he can, orchestrate everything to feel safe. So I was in it. I knew exactly how he felt, exactly what was going on. And it was a matter of kind of bringing that down. Where my other son, it was more a matter of drawing him in and bringing up those things that were kind of repressed, if that makes sense. And so I really think it's how it intersected with their temperament that had those different presentations. It can be tricky because the same thing, the same experience may present differently. And so again, that's where a therapist can be really helpful, of like, what is going on under the surface, because it's not always clear.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I love how you talked about your kids are different. So it sounds like in the first two, you've identified some things that maybe you need outside help. And like you mentioned in the hospital, almost all children have anxiety. So as parents, how do we know when it's just a normal human emotion that they have anxiety, or if it's something serious that we need to help them with?
So I would say, one, there are some developmental periods of anxiety that are expected. So, you think of the stranger anxiety with the 9-month-old to 12-month-olds, right? And the babies all of a sudden are afraid of strangers. And then there's some separation anxiety in the toddler years. Around 3 preschool years, you have being afraid of the dark, right? And so these are things can we kind of hear of, or our pediatrician will tell us at our checkups, that are kind of normal patterns as kids are learning, are gaining more understanding of their environment and trying to figure out if they're safe or not. And so for childhood anxiety, they're always looking to the parents for help, where kids are wired to go to an adult to help assess for them if they're safe or not. So they hear a loud sound and they run to mom. They don't sit there and think, well, where was that coming from? What's really going on? All the cognitive problem-solving things we do as adults, our kids literally can't. So they come to us for that. And so I think there's a degree, where it's a situation or it's a developmental milestone where you kind of expect, and it kind of makes sense, oh, that's scary to you. Let me help you feel safe. I think what's hard about when it's anxiety disorder, and that's helpful. So let me go back and say that anxiety is a helpful emotion. It helps us read our environment, and as they gain more cognitive resources, be able to assess and respond to our environment for safety. So there is a good side to it. It becomes disordered when it is overexpressed. So they have a greater degree of anxiety than what's normal. And that's so hard to tell. And I would say that was what was hard with my firstborn, is that he was my first. As much as I had cared for other people's kids, kids are more free with their emotions with their parents than strangers. And so that was hard to tell. And I definitely had a lot of conversations with my pediatrician about it. But the other part that can be a sign of an anxiety disorder is sometimes even imagined threats. And so that was kind of the sign for me with my son. The generalized anxiety is that it was just a nondescript feeling, right? This dread. And it wasn't based on something that had happened. That was something you could reason through, It wasn't based on any actual threat. It was just this kind of sense. With OCD, it's a little bit different. So OCD has this magical thinking component where it's not based on anything that you can connect logically. It's very kind of nonsensical, but it's very real for the child. And so even though it doesn't make sense to you, and as the child gets old enough to have more cognitive resources, it doesn't make sense to them either. But they are desperate to relieve that anxiety. And so they do the compulsions to get some relief. So as much as it doesn't make sense, they do get some temporary relief. But then it cycles back around. And so it's this never-ending cycle. You get some temporary relief, but then it comes back. And so how that can show up for parents, sometimes, like I said, with my son, it was tricky because he didn't pull me into that. He wasn't seeking me to be a part of his compulsions. But a lot of times for anxiety and compulsions, and this gets me to the kind of third sign that it's something more, is that they do involve the parents. So with anxiety, they might try to control their external world to feel better. And so they're going to seek reassurance from their parents. They're going to seek their parents to avoid what they're afraid of and to get relief from the anxiety. And, compassionate moms and dads see their child in despair and want to relieve that for them. And so it can turn into a lot of avoidance and a lot of over helping to get that temporary relief for the child. And so there is a reward, but the more they offer that avoidance, when we call that accommodation, so going above and beyond what you normally would do, it feeds the anxiety and makes it worse. And so same with OCD, the parents can be part of the compulsion. And so the parents can give reassurance, but with OCD, the reassurance is a compulsion, so it doesn't satisfy. So the parent ends up answering and giving the same reassurance over and over and over. And it doesn't, in the long run, relieve. It maybe immediately does, but that tends to grow.
So you're saying you can have anxiety without OCD, but you can have it overlap as well. And either way, they tend to pull the parents into it to help them either with anxiety in general, relieve the stress of it and wanting that reassurance above and beyond what's normal. But then with OCD, that we might as parents be part of the, what is the word that you used?
Accommodation.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's hard to tell. So that's why a lot of parents get into this place where anxiety or OCD has kind of taken over their whole relationship and their whole household, because it is natural to want to help your child when they're anxious and to relieve them. That's how anxiety functions on a normal level. But when it's on the disordered level, they don't actually get relief, and it tends to build. Their level of anxiety builds instead of improves. So I would say that's my third. So if it seems above and beyond, if it seems nonsensical, or if it seems to have taken over your entire relationship and household, those are signs that you need to get additional help.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of parents would be happy to have kind of that little checklist, because when you're so bogged down by the struggle of it, you just need somebody or something to kind of tell you, this is not normal and you could use a little bit of help here. It just seems like God has put multiple exposures to this in your path. So I can see why you're so passionate about digging deep into the resources and then also wanting to help parents with it.
Yeah. And I would say with nursing, I had the advantage of having so many clients that, when I encountered a kid who didn't want to get up and walk after their appendix was taken out, they were terrified. And the parents were unsure too, because they've never been through this before. But I have. I've seen the improvement. I can see down the road in a way that they can't. And so, sometimes maybe your kid doesn't have a disorder, but you're at a place where it's just you're struggling with your own anxiety and clarity or time management. I mean, my son was making strides fighting his OCD before we even started therapy, but I had 4 kids in a pandemic. So I got a therapist to make sure we continued making progress. So there's a lot of different reasons why having somebody come alongside you might be wise for you to make progress.
So, okay, let's say that you've identified you need help, whether it's a disorder or just a situation like you're talking about where you just need a little extra help in this situation. How do we as parents help our kids in this? How do we navigate this with wisdom instead of projecting our own anxieties or maybe creating something that wasn't there?
Yeah, so I think you definitely said it right there, is not adding our own anxiety. That is the first step. And so, with my son, when he hit puberty and we were at this new level of intensity, my very first goal was to not add. And so that's what I tell parents who are caught in this, escalation cycle is, if you can take a deep breath, go to the bathroom, splash some cold water on your face, take a breath outside, whatever you need to do to interrupt your temptation to rush in. Find a way to slow down and find a way to remember God's presence for you both in that moment and trust his help for you guys and let God hold that space for you, right? Because if our child is feeling afraid and anxious, and then we come in with our fears and anxiety, where else can our child go but more afraid and more anxious, right? And so a lot of parents in that anxiety response will tend to either overprotect. So they'll try to rescue their child. They're afraid. Maybe the thought is, this might be too much for them. This is too much, or they're hurting too much, or I just need this to stop. And so they'll overprotect. The other dynamic, which that same parent can swing to, or a lot of times it's the other parent, will be demanding. They just need to get over it. They don't need to be afraid. This doesn't even make sense. Just stop being afraid. And I don't know if you've ever seen that work, but I've never known it to work for you to command people to feel differently. And then you can imagine in a marriage dynamic how difficult that can be if you have, parents on different sides of that spectrum. And so it really takes a lot of work to kind of calm your own anxiety so that you can then access some wisdom, either what you've learned, and or even just being able to listen to your child to meet them where they're at, just to be present. Take some of that slowing down and finding your own safety in God's presence and his promises. And so that's the first step, is bring your own anxieties to the Lord, not your child.
So I can either, as a mom, or Alan as a dad, we as parents can either kind of project our own anxiety and our kids will, amp theirs up even more. Or I could be a calming presence if I can kind of get my own anxiety out of the way and bring them back down. So they're kind of mirroring my emotions. So it sounds like mine are pretty powerful. Is that right?
Yeah. I heard once, I heard it put recently, you want to be a thermostat, not a thermometer, right? Knowing where you need to be to really assess whether this is a threat or not and respond. So yeah, if your kid's running out into the street, that go out and do it. Like, that is appropriate. But most of our parenting experience is not an actual threat. And our kids need us to assess and respond wisely to keep them safe. But we also have to remember, our kids are growing, right? So I think that is a big part of the perspective too, is, like I said, finding our own safety in God. And then remembering our kids need us to do that higher level thinking for them, right? They're coming to us because they're not able to do that higher level thinking. And so to be able to enter into my child's anxiety, like I said, I have to take my own to the Lord. And then to be able to enter theirs, I have to see it for what it is. I have to meet them where they're at. And so that's the empathy piece, is recognizing you're legitimately having a hard time with this, whether you should be, whether it makes sense, whether I've ever felt that way or not. I can see you're having a really hard time and you seem scared, right? So we need to see our children in that moment. But we also need to move up to that next step and coach our children and have some confidence to see our kids as capable, right? So the overprotective person tends to be very empathetic, but they struggle to be confident that their child is capable of handling these feelings. A lot of times because the parents don't feel capable themselves of handling those feelings, right? So there's that projection piece again.
What's the balance in validating feelings, but not validating the reality? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. So you focus on the feeling underneath, not the thought or their own assessment, right? Because their own assessment is limited. So you want to help them go back a few steps to what they're feeling. You're feeling afraid. If they're able to talk, I might use open-ended questions to really understand what's going on with them. And then I might restate it. And so when I restate what's going on with them, I affirm their feeling, but then I restate the reality. So you are feeling really scared right now. The reality is you don't know what's going to happen today. I can't tell you if it's going to be good or bad today, but you don't know what's going to happen today, right? So I'm going to my example of my son with morning dread. You're really worried right now and you don't know what's going to happen today. I'm not going to tell him that something bad is going to happen today. I don't know that. I can't affirm that, but I can affirm that he doesn't know what's going to happen and that every day has a mix of good and bad. But I can also affirm now, if I can, again, affirm the feeling and restate the reality, and in a validating way of like, when things don't, so, it's just a real feeling, right? But it doesn't always tell you what's true about reality. And I even said that to my son, like, your feelings don't always tell you what's true. So let's go back to what you are feeling, and then let's look at what's true. In that empathy piece, it's been really helpful as well to sometimes separate the anxiety from themselves, right? So an anxious kid, or whether it's anxiety or OCD, is wanting to control the environment around them. And what we teach them to do instead is to recognize that anxiety or OCD as something separate, that they can control that, right? So with my son with OCD, we actually named it and drew a picture. And so his is Gerald the dog. I have a friend whose son who named his Benny the worry shark, because he's one that seeks a lot of reassurance. And so the shark was perfect. He kept circling. And so with my friend whose son also has OCD, he was over one time and got triggered around mealtime. And part of his compulsion was around people were spitting on his food, is the irrational thought he had, even though no one was near his food. And so instead of arguing him of why it was not even possible that other people were spitting on his food, that's not going to relieve his anxiety. I said, it sounds like Benny's trying to ruin your lunch. And so naming it as something separate helps them then externalize it. And that's how our upper brain is able to problem solve.
Even with your friend's child, your friend had done the work outside the moment of just giving the OCD a name, Benny the worry shark. Mm-hmm. So you were able to enter in safely with him. You were safe with me. You weren't projecting your own anxiety of, I could just hear myself maybe saying, "Oh, don't worry. It's fine. They're not going to here. Let me just move your plate. Let me just get it out of the way."
That's an accommodation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen it now.
So instead of just moving the plate or reassuring, you mentioned you were safe and then you empathized. But part of that empathy you're saying is not only statements of, I can see that you're scared about this or worried about this, but it's also externalizing the anxiety or the OCD in this case.
Yeah. And that has been really helpful. I think mostly I've noticed there's a shift when you do it that way, that they realize what's going on. And this has been helpful for my son too. When I use these specific terms we've used, it kind of helps him recognize what's happening. For us to gain that understanding of how their anxiety shows up and be able to name it helps them be like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't me. This is my anxiety.
Does that move into the coach piece then? Part of the externalizing it, you're kind of equipping them to deal with something external, or tell us more about that next aspect of coaching them through it.
Yeah. So, once they feel seen and understood and actually understand themselves, I think that's part of the benefit of being empathetic with kids, is that they're learning the language for what's going on. They don't know how to identify it for us a lot of times. And so we're helping them build that self-awareness and recognition. And so once we've done that, if we only do that, then they're like, okay, now what? Right? You've understood me, but they don't know what to do with that. And so the coach piece is where I really celebrate the parent that's been demanding. And so I will take that as a gift, right? I'll go with the gift gone awry idea that overprotective parent has this empathetic gift that we just need to use more rightly, and we need to start there. But my demanding parent has a gift in the situation too. The demanding parent knows my child can handle this, and that is true. And so if I come at this knowing my child can handle this, then I have the motivation to coach them, right? And so that's one thing we teach parents when your child is in the throes of anxiety, are really struggling and wanting you to do something, instead of accommodate, doing the work to stay calm, and then using, we call it just a statement, like a one sentence that has empathy and confidence. So I can see you're having a really hard time right now. I know you can figure out what to do next, right? So say I've coached my child outside the moment with some tools, or they've been in therapy. They're not going to use those tools unless they're given an opportunity to use them. And so I am going to hold that space with empathy and confidence and allow them to be responsible for their own anxiety, so that they can use those tools and build those muscles and really gain a tolerance for the anxiety. With anxiety disorders, they don't go away. There's no cure necessarily. It's learning how to manage it well. And that lessens it. The severity definitely can change, right? We can lessen that anxiety where it's a much quieter voice, but they're never going to learn how to fight against it, how to quiet that anxiety, unless we give them the opportunities. And that's going to be hard at first.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about the example with the neighbor or the friend's son who didn't want the spit on his food. And how would you walk us through? You were talking about the Connected Families framework has been a helpful way of thinking through the issue of anxiety. So I'm just going to throw another one at you. What about like swim lessons, or a child being afraid of being alone? Could you maybe help us through a quick little role play, how you would handle either one of those?
Yeah, I actually have a client who I've been working with who has made a lot of progress with her daughter being alone upstairs, which has been an issue in our house too. Something about a different floor adds to that anxiety. So I would say in prepping this role play, one thing this mom did was get a children's book. And the one she used is kind of on the bestseller list right now. There's a lot of different books, but it's called The Invisible String. And so it's an idea that there's this invisible string that connects them even when they're apart. They used a book to do outside the moment coaching before we have this situation where we're now wanting to go upstairs and hesitant.
Okay. Yeah. So is this like bedtime where she's afraid, or any time?
Yeah. Let's say she needs to go get changed into her play clothes for the day, but her room is upstairs and I'm downstairs working on breakfast.
Okay. I'll be the daughter, because I am a girl, so I'll take it, Alan.
Okay. So I'm going to make up the name just for privacy's sake, but all right. Yeah. So I'm mom. I'm in the kitchen. I'm cooking. I'll use your name, Corrie.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah. Good morning, Corrie. I'm making Mom. Breakfast. Good morning. Are you ready for some pancakes?
Yes, I love pancakes. I want to eat right now.
Oh, right now. Well, they're not quite ready yet, but what do we do before we eat? Do you remember?
Yeah, I have to get dressed.
That's right. It's time to get out of those PJs and get ready for the day. Once you run upstairs and get dressed, and by the time you're back, the pancakes will be ready to go.
I don't want to go upstairs. I don't want to. I hate getting dressed.
Oh my. You hate getting dressed?
Yes.
What do you hate about it?
Well, I just don't like it.
Yeah. Do you like, is it being upstairs? Because I know sometimes you don't like being upstairs.
Yeah, I don't like being upstairs.
Yeah. What about being upstairs is not fun?
Because I have to be all by myself. I just want to eat pancakes.
Yeah. I want to eat pancakes with you too. But do you remember the story we read about the invisible string?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So when you go upstairs, that string is long enough, right? So when you're upstairs in your room, are you alone?
No.
No, we're connected. That invisible string. And do you know who else is upstairs with you? God is with you. He's with you on the stairs. He's with you in your room. So are you really alone up there?
I guess not.
I guess not. Why don't you try it? Let's try it, okay? I'm going to be in here getting your pancakes ready. I don't want them to burn. I want to keep them yummy. So I'm going to stay right here to make sure we have yummy pancakes. And you follow that, stretch that invisible string up the stairs and see if it reaches all the way to your room. And if you're a little bit unsure, you can't feel the string, you can ask God to let you know He's there, okay? Why don't you try it? Go ahead.
Okay.
Do you feel ready to try it in this role play? Do you feel empowered?
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, I could see myself maybe still resisting, but you were really calm with me and you didn't have an agenda. You did want to get back to your pancakes so they wouldn't burn, but you
There's
weren't.
a shared goal there.
Yeah. You weren't stressed about me just going. You know, you could have said, just go. It is not that difficult. You're not really alone. I'm here in the house with you, and start rationalizing it. But I heard you do those things. You were safe, calm. You empathized with me, kind of identified my emotion and maybe why I was feeling that way. Felt like that would have maybe helped me know it wasn't just about getting dressed, but it was about, oh yeah, it's that whole alone thing that we've talked about outside the moment.
I think also I could imagine myself being dismissive and not necessarily shaming or blaming, but just kind of saying, oh, there's nothing there. You're okay. And then turning around and kind of leaving the kid to figure it out themselves. But I appreciated how, I guess that was the coaching piece. You didn't just say, here, I'm pushing you out of the nest, go fly. But you reminded them or you reminded Corrie, I guess, of what y'all had talked about. And then like you communicated, you can do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually shared today on my Instagram, Philippians 4:9. I was reading in the Philippians 4:8, you know, the set your mind on whatever is pure and lovely and all that, all the positive thoughts, which is great. But the verse right after is that next step after we've been affirmed and we've set our mind, right? We've talked about maybe why our child is safe or what is good or their previous success, right? What you know. And the next verse says, whatever you've learned, whatever you've received, whatever you've seen, go practice it, right? And then the peace of God will be with you. And so we have to allow our children to practice what we've trained them in, and so that they can own that and they can practice that and experience that peace. And so as much as we want to protect our children, if we think of it as finding that just right challenge, and I know Connected Families Resources, that's the kind of language they use, and different resources will use different terms. But if we meet them where they are, but keep moving them forward and giving them space. So I didn't require that my child feel confident. I just required them to practice, right? So in reality, when we do this invisible string, maybe right after we read the book, we go up, and it depends on how afraid your child is. Everybody's different. I don't want to oversimplify it, but maybe my child needs to go up 5 steps, without me watching. Maybe my child just needs to go to the top of the stairs and then back down, and we celebrate that. I know with my own kids, we had a timer, and it was like, okay, can you be in your room by yourself for 1 whole minute, and then they built on that previous success there, but I had to allow them to be uncomfortable so that they could get more comfortable.
Yeah. And then you were celebrating it too. I love that.
Yeah. So I think for us parents, it's important that we have the empathy to see where our child is, to understand rightly the nature of their struggle, but then also have confidence that they can learn and grow, to have confidence that actually my adult brain knows that you're actually safe in your room, right? And so I'm going to be confident that you are safe and that you can learn to feel safe, but that's going to come through opportunities. It may not look pretty. It may be hard. I mean, it breaks my heart when my child is struggling through a challenge, but I keep sight of this is how they learn how to do this, is by doing it. And so I know suffering is part of God's plan to grow us. And I'm trusting God that it's not going to break my child, that He's going to work it together for their good, to make them stronger and to help them learn. And so that, again, goes back to my foundation of trusting God over my child, of trusting His protection and His plan.
Oh, so good, Katie. Yeah, I love how you just brought it back to the foundation piece, because our kids can experience safety with us when we are resting in God's promises, and they can grow in their walk with the Lord when we're allowing them the opportunities. And when our mind can get wrapped around, this is not just an inconvenience to my schedule that they're worried, or maybe a little more kind toward the child. It is
inconvenient.
Yeah, right.
And parenting is inconvenient.
Yes. But it helps that foundation when we can approach it like, wow, this is an opportunity to help them grow and to practice what God has called them to.
Yeah, I learned a lot of common psychology and professionals who are treating kids with anxiety. But as a Christian, I want to give God the glory, and I want to point my children to the Bible in these things. And so one of the other things I just wanted to throw in there is, and you reminded me of it when we talked about back to that foundation, is letting my children know that's how I can be confident. That's how I can be calm, is because of what the Bible says and the Holy Spirit being with me and empowering me. And so I do think it's so important for us to do, but it's important for us to let our kids know our source, because I'm in healthcare. I know the harsh realities. I can't promise you that I'll always be here to be your calm and safe person. I wish I could. But, I may not always be that person, but everything I'm giving you is from God, and He is always there and is the same. I'm not the same yesterday, today, or tomorrow, but God is, and so reminding my children of that constant source. And then the other thing that I found kind of a light bulb moment when we were externalizing our anxiety and looking at it, is explaining to my children, in the Bible, it talks a lot about the spirit and the flesh. And God has made us a new creation, but we still have this flesh we war against. And that reminds me of how we talk about anxiety and OCD, that it's the way our brain is wired. So there is a literal flesh component to it. There's neurological, biological connections that are in their brain. But God has promised us that He will make us a new creation. And it speaks to that neuroplasticity, that even though my brain is set up this way, I can still learn and I can still grow. And that is the hope of that God didn't just die for our sins, but He rose again and He sent His Holy Spirit, and that we're not stuck where we are.
Yeah, transforming us into the image of His Son. And Romans 12:2, he's transforming our minds. I love that, how you connected it. So fun when brain science really does line up with scripture. Doesn't God know all things?
Yeah.
And then he allows us to discover some things too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really just validates the scripture. It was already there, but sometimes it helps us really analytical people see it that much more clearly.
So, Katie, if there is a parent who feels like their child is struggling with anxiety and they would be interested in coaching with you, tell us a little bit about what that would look like. What do you provide for people?
So I have some clients that are doing the typical 4 sessions where we work through each step of the framework, and their child may have anxiety, but it's kind of a piece. And so that is one option. And then we kind of stay flexible. If it is clear we need to dig into the anxiety element a bit more, then we can add sessions. But if you know it's anxiety that has your family stuck, then I do have a 6-session package where we go through the framework, but we also bring in these tools, kind of beef it up with these extra tools to really deconstruct the accommodations in a way that's clear, is practical, but is also considerate of the child, right? So kind of meeting them where they are, finding that just right challenge, and really, again, just kind of bolsters the parent in undoing these routines and traditions that have become a part of their daily life. It's really hard to undo. And so there's, again, a couple extra sessions to kind of really focus on resetting the anxiety challenge.
You have a list of resources on your website that we'll link to in our show notes. And if parents want to hear more from you about anxiety, where can they find you?
I do talk about it at times on Instagram and Facebook, and then in Clubhouse. Sometimes I'll kind of share more information and engage with people, just, little tips and tidbits, book recommendations and stuff on social media at Parent with Hope Coach.
Great.
I will say up front, I am not a therapist. And so really, if you feel like you need more tools for your child, I recommend seeking out help locally for your child. But I'm here to kind of help you as a parent with how to position your whole family for overcoming this. And so there are so many resources out there. These are ones that have helped me as a mom and have helped moms that I work with. And so there is going to be more than what's on this list. But if you want a few places that I enjoyed starting, this list is a great place to kind of get some ideas.
Great. Well, thank you so much for putting that together. And we are just so glad that you came on the podcast today. And it was a really fun conversation.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Don't forget to check out Katie's website, parentwithhope.org/resources, to learn more about helping our kids with anxiety. And if you're enjoying listening to these podcasts, go ahead and subscribe so you can hear what we have coming up. There are some great interviews ahead.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.